Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Tyler Simone and you are watching Reading in Black. Welcome if this is your first time seeing me, and hello to all of my subscribers. Before I get started with this video, I just want to give a disclaimer and say that I will be discussing sexuality, rape culture, and sexual assault in this video in relation to feminism. So if any of that sounds a bit triggering for you, I suggest that you go ahead and skip over this video. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. There will be more to come, so subscribe and let's just jump right into it. Okay, so I've been reading Hood Feminism, right? I did one other video on this book by Mikki Kendall a few weeks back, maybe a month ago or so. I'll link it down below. And that video was more so about whether or not the feminist movement is in favor of all women, because some people feel like it is, other people feel like it isn't, and Mikki Kendall goes into why it really is not in this book. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about rape culture, sexual assault, objectification, fetishization, and hypersexualization in relation to feminism, and whether or not women of all kinds, of all races, of all ethnicities are being protected from these things by the feminist movement. After reading chapter 4 in Hood Feminism, it's called #Fast-Tailed Girls and Freedom, I realized that no, not all women are being protected from rape culture, sadly. And Mikki Kendall goes into why and how rape culture a lot of the time is justified by a lot of different things. And it's justified sometimes by the feminist movement itself, which is kind of the opposite of what's supposed to be happening. So this chapter, it starts off talking about the word fast, and I am black. If you didn't know, okay, let me start over. I am black, which means I was raised in the black community. In the black community, there's this word that's thrown around, and the word is fast. Now, fast basically means that you are doing too much. You're being sexual in some way. You're dressing too womanly, too grown for your age. So as young girls, we're taught not to be fast, and we're also taught not to hang out with girls who are fast. And what's weird is the word is supposed to be some sort of protection, but it often ends up being oppressive because it attempts to govern how young black women engage with their own sexuality. As we all know, our bodies develop, and they start to develop at, you know, early teens, maybe even a little bit earlier for some people. And in our community, sometimes that is seen as being fast. And it's just a really hard concept to grasp because nobody can control how fast their body develops or when their body starts to develop. But what's scary is that those are the kind of things that are made to seem like they are our fault. So from a very young age, we experience a lot of victim blaming, which Mikki Kendall goes into in this chapter a lot. She goes into how victim blaming does not help combat rape culture. And I know that as a black girl, and a lot of the black girls that I know, victim blaming starts at a very young age. Everything that we do is going to invite the attention of older men, and if something happens to us, it's our fault. So if we're wearing shorts, whatever happens to us because we wore those shorts is our fault. Any attention that we get from a man because our midriff, our stomach is showing, is our fault, instead of blaming the adult that did whatever they did. It's messed up. It's really, really messed up. And as we get older, that doesn't stop, of course. She says, warnings about avoiding being fast are a deeply flawed response to the problem of sexual violence. Why? Well, you don't actually have to be sexually precocious to be labeled a fast-tailed girl. So you don't even have to have been involved in sex. You don't even have to have kissed a boy before or anything. But if you look a certain way, you are labeled as fast. Perception is everything, and so a host of perfectly normal, age-appropriate behaviors like talking to boys, wearing shorts, and wearing makeup, or even going through puberty early are enough to convince some people that you're headed for trouble. And once that perception is entrenched any bad things that happen to you are automatically your fault. In any given week, you can find articles from mainstream, ostensibly feminist sites that turn rape prevention into a circle jerk of not quite victim blaming. They're filled with tips about how to fight a stranger, what not to wear or drink, and where not to go. Why are we telling women what not to do instead of telling the men? Maybe don't touch someone who didn't give you permission. Maybe don't get a woman intoxicated to the point where she can't stand up and then coerce her into coming up to your bedroom. Maybe not do that. I don't know. She says, it's easy to blame the patriarchy, to rightfully point at the men who rape and hold them accountable. What's harder is to notice the women who sometimes passively direct rapists toward their victims by contributing to the hypersexualization of women of color under the guise of empowerment. The same imagery they claim to find sexually empowering is rooted in the myth of white women's purity and every other woman's sexual availability. I don't think that white women are the only women in the world who dress up as characters or have costumes such as the sexy Pocahontas costume for events like Coachella or Halloween. I think women of all ethnicities and races do this. They do every year. But I do think she has a point about how something that is seen as empowering for women is also ignoring the fact that fetishization is happening, the fetishization of a community or a certain type of woman. And reading all this is new to me as well. I knew that there was cultural appropriation going on every single year with things like Coachella and Halloween, and that in itself is wrong and offensive to people of different communities, but I never thought about how something that is seen as empowering could also be further fetishizing a certain community of women. There's nothing empowering about the idea that the road to their sexual freedom is making a fetish costume out of a culture. When people wear these costumes, I don't think that they are consciously thinking to themselves about how what they're doing is going to perpetuate stereotypes or rape culture. I think that they're doing it to feel sexy or whatever it is, and that's kind of the problem. The problem is that a lot of people don't think further than what's going on at this moment, and they don't consider other people's feelings or how it's going to affect other people. So you may be thinking that you still don't understand how something like a sexy costume could perpetuate rape culture. Well, she says, when fetishization goes beyond consensual kink and into a green light to target communities, then we have to break down how sexual empowerment narratives can be twisted to feed into the problem. Racism seems to make its way into every conversation, and this one is no different. She talks about how racism definitely plays a role in all of this. So when we talk about victims of sexual assault going to the police, we have to also consider whether or not those victims feel safe going to the police. And she brought up how much sexual assault happens within the police force, and it's pretty bad. When we encourage victims to turn to the police but ignore that the second most common form of police misconduct is sexual assault, how are we helping victims feel safer? We can't ignore that. So if sexual assault is happening when people are in custody of the police, but the police are supposed to be who we go to report sexual assault, what are we supposed to do? We do know from a report published by CNN in October 2018 that between 2005 and 2013, police officers were charged with at least 400 sexual assaults. And like she says in the book, these numbers don't count the number of assaults that were happening off duty. They don't count the number of assaults that are happening between partners of police officers and their partners. And it doesn't talk about the assault that happens when people are actually in jail. And it makes sense to bring this up because women of color are not protected when they aren't in police custody. So they aren't protected by people in their own communities. And the feminist movement doesn't even protect all women. So what makes us think that them going to the police and reporting a sexual assault is going to help them in any way? Page 60, this part is so good. It says, rape culture, a system that positions some bodies as deserving to be attacked, hinges on ignoring the mistreatment of marginalized women, whether they are in the inner city, on a reservation, are migrant workers, or are incarcerated. Because their bodies are seen as available and often disposable, sexual violence is tactically normalized even as people decry its impact on those with more privilege. So basically, some human bodies are worth protecting and others are not. Some human bodies are worthy of talking about or considering. If we believe that only some people deserve safety, that the right to your own body has to be earned through adhering to arbitrary rules, then are we really seeing each other as equals? No, we're not. And that's the whole point. A really good point that she made at the end of this chapter is that we all need to remember that every sexual assault victim did not deserve it. They didn't ask for it, and they're not responsible for rape culture at all. Not only do we need to take responsibility and stop victim blaming, but we also need to teach our children how to respect other people and other people's bodies. And I will leave you with this point. She says, as a whole, feminism has to focus on change inside individual communities as well as across the world. We have to shift the focus on anti-rape narratives away from what victims can do to prevent it and toward teaching people not to be predators in the first place. The problem has never been the ways that victims don't tell, so much as it has been that some victims aren't seen as valuable enough to protect. Conversations about sexual assault are never easy to have, but I do think that they are conversations that we need to have as a community or as a society, because sexual assault happens every single day. And it happens even more so in marginalized communities, as we've been reading in Hood Feminism. And it's sad to me to find out that the feminist movement is not as supportive of all women like they claim to be when it comes to sexual assault, or that they are kind of quiet when they should be stepping up to speak up for those women. It just sucks. But on a lighter note, I just want to say thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed this very tough but interesting conversation. Tap the notification bell and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.